Uncle Rico, you're right. And Josh, are you ready for me to do my top 10?
I got one team to figure out. So yeah, go with your top 10 and
It's funny
I'll have
because
mine done.
I've got two teams to figure out because this top 10, I honestly want to stop at 8. It's
Uh-huh.
awful. Like
Yeah,
right.
yeah, guys in the chat. So this is your challenge as we're going right now, and you're. I think people have gotten a little nicer to each other. That there's game days here going back and forth. But I'm telling you right now in the chat, do a top 10, and I mean 10.
Yeah.
Like
Yes.
try to figure out 8, 9, 10. It ain't
And this will
fun.
get cut up. This is going to get cut up into a top 10, and we give y'all homework all the time. Y'all are going to call us crazy. You're off the jump. You're going to call me crazy. Give me your top 10 and tell me why we don't know what we're talking about, because I'll tell you, we don't. Nobody is looking at the teams in the college football right now and says, oh, I can give you 10 teams. The problem I have right now, Josh, is we're getting into this like resume versus quality range of not knowing what to do, and that's really messing with me. And one of mine, number 9, is what's gonna make people laugh at me, but I'm gonna do it anyway. All right, top 10. Number 1, Josh, I've got Tennessee. I have Tennessee right now because they have the best win in the country and they've been absolutely dominant outside of that pit game. And Ohio State fans are going to say, well, wait, we've been dominant. We dominated Penn State today. And that one's not good. But we've already talked about 2014 Ohio State. And I think that Tennessee is in that realm, in that 2014 Ohio State was so much better in week 9 than they were in week 1. And I think that Tennessee right now, in addition to having the best win in the country, is also absolutely dominant. And I think that they've earned it. And I am fully admitting that they might lose to Georgia Saturday. But this week, right now, I've got Tennessee number 1, and it's a combination of ranking and earning. Tennessee has had a tougher schedule than Ohio State, and I don't think Kentucky's great. I don't want Big Ten fans get at me. I don't think Kentucky's great at all. I don't think there's, just like I've been giving Penn State credit all year for beating the brakes off of Auburn. Auburn's a bad team, but beating them that bad is impressive. I do want to see Tennessee beat somebody away from home. That's of note. Number 2 is Ohio State. I'm not really punishing them for today at all. I still think that they're the best team in the Big Ten. I was a little concerned for 2.5 quarters, but they also handle their business. I mean, I said that was going to be a 10-point game, I think, and I said that I wouldn't look poorly on them if they won that by 1 point, because it's a tough place to play, and I think Penn State is better than people are giving them credit. And I think in a loss, until the last kind of 6 minutes of that game, even in a loss, I might have Penn State in my top 10. I think they'll be a little deflated at this point to say they're number 10 in the top 10. Number 3 is Georgia. They were dominant today as well. I think Anthony Richardson getting hurt early had a little bit of impact on what that Florida offense could do. I said Florida finds a way to get 20 points. They did that. But Stetson Bennett getting it done, man. This offense getting it done. We'll see when they play Tennessee if they can keep up. Alabama number 4 ahead of Michigan number 5. If Alabama played Michigan today, I think that Alabama would win. I don't think that Michigan would be undefeated with Alabama's schedule, because I don't think Michigan could beat Tennessee on the road at Tennessee. We talked about that earlier, and I think it's because there are some teams in this top 5, top 10 that Michigan could beat, but Tennessee has a very, very, very good run defense, and obviously a great offense. I think they would stress Michigan in the same way they stressed Alabama. Number 6, I have Oregon. Oregon has been dominant, and I really struggle with Oregon in that I can't forget that first game of the year. I just can't. But I also think that they're a different team at this point in the season. They did have to do everything they could to beat Washington State. Let's not forget that. Like, they were trailing that entire game until the very end. But I also say everybody has warts this year, including number 7, Clemson, which gets us to Uncle Rico's super chat. We've got more information with Clemson. That's the thing that I want people to really understand with them, in that last week that we told everybody, pump the brakes on Syracuse as a ranked win. Pump the brakes on that being a big win. Syracuse isn't a good football team. They got beat soundly today by a mediocre Notre Dame team. Wake Forest had 6 turnovers in one quarter, which I think is a record. Lost to a bad football team. So these wins that Clemson's hanging their hat on to be in the top 4, top 5, Wake Forest and Syracuse, don't look great. And then who else have they beat? NC State sucks this year. And even when they had Leary. I've got TCU at number 8. I've bumped them down one spot. That defense concerns me. I think if we're talking about them being ranked where they in the top 10 because they have a clean record, I will agree. But that defense is going to get them in trouble at some point in the year. But I do love what they've done offensively. Here's where I'll make everybody mad, Josh, if I haven't already. Number 9, I've got LSU. Kind of back to the point we were talking about earlier where they've gotten better throughout the year. I've got LSU at number 9, and this is less about resume and more about would I want to play LSU tomorrow? Gun to my head, do I think LSU might beat Clemson? Maybe. I think they might. Do I think they might beat the team that I have number 10 in USC? I think they would. Number 10, USC, I'm struggling putting them in the top 10 at all. They have a clean record, but with a loss. They lost last week to Utah. They have a clean-ish record, but they barely beat Oregon State. They barely beat Arizona. And my question is, if USC was playing in the Big 12 or the Big 10, would they still be 6-1? Or are we giving them credit, too much credit, for having a schedule that is just not good? And I've got them in there because who else do I put? Penn State in there with a loss today? Do I put UCLA in there after getting worked last week? It's so hard, guys. It's really hard. I've got 10 USC there, but I don't think I think that there's a lot of teams 11 to 30 that would beat USC, but for now I got to give that clean record a little bit of credit. Josh, give me your top 10. Let's see how you do.
Yeah, it's tough, and it's tough at the top and it's tough at the bottom. My number 1 team remains Ohio State. I still think they're the most complete team. Defensively, they're very good. Offensively, they continue to scare me a little bit at times, but when they're in rhythm and they're working, they're great. It's really obvious now that playing on the road matters again for some reason in college football. That was a tough environment. And they did sort of sleepwalk offensively for the second time this year for the majority of a game. But when they came on, and their weapons are better than anyone else's. But again, the defensive side of the ball was what really stood out. And if they have that kind of balance, I don't know that anyone else really matches it in terms of explosive potential on offense and good defense. Nobody else is really there. My number 2 team is Tennessee. They're offensively, they are the best team in the country right now. The way they're playing today, they are the best offensive football team in the country. And somebody's saying like, you can look at statistics in Georgia or Ohio State. I don't really care what statistics you want to throw out there. Ohio State or Georgia, neither one of them are moving the ball with anywhere near the same consistency. Tennessee can run the ball very successfully. They can throw the ball very successfully, and they're doing it against pretty darn good defenses and at times making it look kind of easy. They remind me a lot of 2012 Texas A&M, maybe 2019 LSU. Like there aren't that many teams that move the ball that easy as an offense. They're not built the same way 19 LSU is, which is why I say the A&M team a little more quarterback driven, a little more explosive, razzle dazzle. 2019 LSU could just sort of work the field and just beat you at every position doing whatever they wanted to do just due to their star talent. And quarterback play. And I'm not sure LSU is quite the same machine, or Tennessee is, but that LSU team was, but they're still good enough to be my number 2. My number 3 is Georgia. I mean, they're still a very good football team. Georgia's I think, handled Florida pretty well. Now, that was a one-score game in the fourth quarter before they kind of stepped on Florida and put them away. But I think that shows the problem with Georgia. They're offensively, when you really challenge them, you can really kind of see that offense start to creak. And they've got the best tight end room in the country, but as I've always maintained, you can't consistently maintain high scoring through a tight end room. I mean, they make phenomenal plays, but they don't turn into 80-yard touchdowns play after play. And they do a couple times. That Bowers catch was great, and catch and run, but it kind of depends on the DB falling down, right? I mean, you can't do that on a consistent enough basis to put up the kind of game like Harrison just did against Penn State. And that's kind of the limiter for Georgia. I think defensively they're very good. But it was really obvious when Anthony Richardson hurt his leg in this game today, it just broke Florida offensively. He's not a good passer. And if he can't run, then you get the numbers advantage. And when they started running him in the second half and they got the numbers from that, all of a sudden Florida looked like the run team that they went into this game as statistically. And they did move the ball on Georgia quite a bit. So that, again, it kind of gave me a little bit of pause. I think Georgia is a very, very good team. I don't think they're as good a team as they were last year. I'm not sure if that's good enough to win a title or not, but that's kind of where they are. My number 4 team is Michigan. I think Michigan didn't really impress me that much against Michigan State. That was a slow burn against a not very good team. I've seen them be too inconsistent on offense too many times now. When they get explosives in the run game, they can be great, but that is also something that can be taken away from you. And so, yeah, I think defensively they're a very good defense. I'm not sure that they're as good as they were last year in certain ways. I think they're more consistent and complete, but they're not as splashy. And they're just, I think there's a limit in what they are offensively and defensively. And if they face a truly elite unit that's clicking on either side of the ball, I think they probably would get exposed a little bit. And when you're talking top 4, top 5 rankings, we're in that kind of a discussion. They're going to beat most teams, are going to beat them most pretty badly, but Georgia, Tennessee, Ohio State, Alabama are different animals. And that's leads into my number 5, which is still Alabama. Alabama with that loss has to be lower out of the top 4. I'll be honest, if they were to play right now, I don't know that I would pick Michigan to beat Alabama. And I don't know where Alabama is going to be. They've been really weird because Bryce Young's been hurt for a few weeks, and that really affected them offensively. And then defensively, they started really great and almost elite, got exposed by Tennessee. But this is a big point that really hits me in mind for 2 teams. One, Alabama, one you discussed, Daniel, and that's LSU. Getting exposed by Tennessee may not be that bad of an indictment. It may be that Tennessee is in that elite offense tier that we talk about all the time, where those teams are just going to score 40 plus every game. They might be the one team that's really doing that. And if that's the case, now I do think Alabama had a lot of issues in that game, but I think they kind of got shell shocked, and that might not be the indictment we think it is. And otherwise, I haven't seen them put together a good game offensively and defensively, but they've looked as good as anyone offensively, and they've looked as good as anyone defensively at different points. If they put it together, I still am on the page with Josh Pate to say their potential is to be the best team in the country, because their defensive potential is higher than even Ohio State's, for example. And their offense isn't as loaded as Ohio State, but I think their defense has the potential to be that much better than Ohio State's, where they can play on that same tier. But they haven't put it together, and so they have to stay down there at number 5. My number 6 is Clemson, and this is where we start sort of getting into default rankings. I am not that high on Clemson. I completely agree with Daniel that I am really concerned that they're a mirage due to their schedule. I was never very high on Wake Forest. I've watched them some this year. I don't think they're a great football team. I think their defense is poor. NC State, I think, is a way worse football team than people thought they were going to be going into the year. I don't know why, but they're just not as good, particularly defensively. I think Clemson, I think, is a beneficiary of their schedule. But they still have a ton of talent. They're running the ball better. They're still good defensively. And at this point, the pickings start getting a little worse. TCU is my next one up. They're number 7. I don't love TCU's defense. And they managed to put away West Virginia, but that's a bad West Virginia team. And they didn't look that much better for a lot of that football game. I don't think TCU is going to keep their record. I think they're going to lose 1 or more games through the remainder of the year. I frankly think they're probably going to end up in my top 10, but they're there right now. And I've said this before. I'm not very high on the Big 12 this year. I was not high on Oklahoma State. I kept not wanting to put them in my top 10. And eventually, this week they kind of showed why maybe they shouldn't have been in my top 10 as they took a loss. Next up for me, number 8 is Oregon. They've been playing great football. Again, the Big 12 and the Pac-12, I'm sketchy on. People, it's easy to rag on the ACC. We forget how isolated every conference is, and my eyes just tell me the Pac-12 is not playing good football. That's just my impression. There aren't a lot of statistics to really match it up, but it's really the same things Daniel said. When you start to break down what a lot of the other teams in the Pac-12 did, the fact that USC lost to Utah and Utah lost to Florida, and Florida is a bad football team by SEC standards, makes it hard for me to really want to put USC in there. I mean, the fact that USC didn't look great week after week against teams that I think are really kind of a second tier for what would be in the Big Ten or SEC alarms me, but I can't put them any lower given their record. And my number 10 is LSU. So you're not so crazy, Daniel, or at least not in my mind. When you get past 8, there are not any really good picks here. And here's the thing with LSU. They've got 2 losses. One was a blowout to Tennessee. That was a game where their starting left tackle and left guard were lost that morning. The left tackle got ill, and then the left guard ends up getting hurt in the first quarter, and the left side of their offensive line collapsed, and then they got blown out by Tennessee, in part because their offense just – when you lose the whole left side of the offensive line and you're just giving up pressure play after play, your offense goes in the tank, and that's what that game was. The problem with me with LSU – right now, I think they're a top 15 quality team. That Florida State loss is bad. And we always talk about it's how you did with your schedule versus how somebody else would do with your schedule. And my problem with LSU is they're a higher quality team, maybe, than they are a ranking team. Because, you've got to ding them for that FSU loss. And so, yeah, I kind of got them in 10, but I also understand why, the AP may not want to rank them higher. The problem, though, when you start looking at the rest of the rankings, right, who else do you want to put in there? Like Ole Miss is one to consider with their 1 loss. But remember, LSU blew out Ole Miss, right? So that's why I have really LSU in the spot they're in. I don't think it can be Utah, given the discussion we just had. I don't think it can be NC State. I don't really buy Illinois. I know they won by a good margin today, but against an awful Nebraska team, I think Illinois is just a product of their schedule. Same deal with UCLA. I think UCLA is a product of their schedule. It's tough. I think the MASH, they've been saying all year, the gap between like 8 and 30 is really slim. I think it's 100% true. I think all these teams in that group, a lot of them are going to take more losses. I think anybody really out of the top 6 is probably, it may well be that no one finishes. There may be something like 5 teams in the country that finish with less than 2 losses. Maybe only could be even 3 or 4. And I do think this is one of those years where we're probably going to have top 3 loss teams in the top 10, just because it seems like this middle tier is destined to beat itself up because it's so competitive in those conferences. But yeah, that's my top 10. And if you think it's easy, good luck trying to do it, because I think after 8, man, it's a mess. If you want to rank based on quality, if you want to rank based on resume, you're going to swap it up a ton, because the difference between number 9 and number 20 isn't that high. And depending on how you want to do your rankings, you're going to end up with a pretty different list each time.